You're listening to the AOD Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center podcast, where we learn from people who are working to improve competitive integrated employment and economic outcomes for people with disabilities. For today's episode, Sierra Royster, the Director of Innovation with APRIL, or the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, talks with Michael Beers, the Youth Transition Coordinator at Summit Independent Living in Missoula, Montana. Michael is also a stand-up comedian and runs improv workshops.
I am Sierra Royster. I'm from APRIL, which is the Associations of Programs for Rural Independent Living. We are a national membership organization for Centers for Independent Living. If you're not familiar with us, Mike Beers today is very familiar with us. But we're excited to kind of have you here today partnering with the DTAC and getting some of the conversation out around employment and how to make it cool and hip, which is the opposite of those words.
I remember us being in a youth training telling people 10 years ago, as soon as you start saying hip, you need to start having your own checked and you need to stop worrying about being cool. Yeah, congratulations, Sia.
I've made it.
We are officially those hip people.
We are.
Fantastic. Well, I am Michael Beers. In addition to being a stand-up comic and speaker, I've worked in independent living for over 20 years. Primarily for Summit Independent Living Center in Montana, Missoula, Montana. Very proud, and we'll talk more about a program specifically through Summit that I've helped develop, along with some national partners and local people called BASE. And then also, I've worked alongside the center and another center who sponsors our youth leadership forum in the state of Montana. So the Montana Youth Leadership Forum. I'm an alumni and also a proud employee of that program as well. And I was on the APRIL board for a number of years. So very familiar with those amazing programs. And it's strive for community and training and all things rural. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, you were, I think, our first youth board seat on the APRIL board.
I was, and quick APRIL plug. I will always have a special place, because it was the early 2000s, and the all the rage was to have national organizations create kids tables of youth, so it'd all be like a separate board with only young people that advise the regular board. And to April's, I always give April credit. They said, you know what, that seems like a lot of work. Why don't we just put a youth on our board with everyone else? And it kind of started a trend. We started seeing that more and more. So shout out to April for that. And I was, very honored to be that first young person.
Well, with that, it's, they put you on the board, but they made you work.
Yes, they did. They did. And yeah, nice segue. I usually have a problem with segues because the throttle's on the right. And for those, it's an audio podcast. I have a very short right arm as well. It's part of my disability. Let's talk employment.
Well, so today, employment's been a conversation forever. I feel like, the goal is to get people employed, people with disabilities at a higher rate of employment. And I think every disability organization and service agency has gone about different ways to bring new employment opportunities, whether that is what the person actually wants to do and could just check off a box, or it is actually helping somebody pursue a career that they actually want to be in. But with your comedy background and natural skill, I think that you've done a really innovative way of kind of approaching employment and talking about employment beyond just how do we get somebody on a job, there's so many things before we get there. But I think you've done a really nice job of opening up the conversation for so long. So I'm excited to hear what you're gonna say about all that.
No, thank you, Sierra. I know, and Sierra and I go way back. We've been working collaboratively in different areas around, like Sierra said, these same questions for a lot of years. And the thing is, they were old questions when we got involved. It seems since I got introduced to the independent living and by extension disability rights movement and those philosophies, housing, transportation, employment, there's the primary four issues that seem to never change as priorities. And, I haven't checked it lately, but it feels like the unemployment rate for people with disabilities has stayed at that rate since I started. And we haven't seen much movement despite a lot of creative, different strategies for approaching this. So, in getting into the schools, I think, like I said, the Youth Leadership Forum was both my introduction to this language of employment and opportunity, um, and my first opportunity to be employed through centers. And once we got into schools, I know a lot of us, began to recognize that yes, our what we were being asked to do was connect young people with employment and housing and those transition goals. Um, but one of the things that became very apparent is that the young people that we're seeing and working with in schools and the issues that they're dealing with, going back to the 2000s and today, are much different than the access issues that began our movements. And it was amazing to be in front of those audience and being able to respond to that. But the question became, how do we respond when the issue for employment isn't a lack of access to a ramp or an elevator, or braille, but it's dealing with mental health, learning disabilities, these types of things. So I know I've seen a lot of those trends go in and out. I think a lot of it too that I recognize and I remember talking about with people working with in schools at the time, Sierra and April, a lot of people at April included, was just that once we got into the schools, despite the money or the grant money or our charge being employment and housing, that's not what the young people were most concerned about. Their concerns really boiled down to like loneliness and a lack of confidence. So and sometimes a home life that was, so it was less about a disability and more about other issues at home. So so how do you deal with those things, and get to those employment goals? Because it seemed like a barrier. Because if you're and it really forced us, it forced us to look at different ways of addressing those issues, and we'll talk about later. Improv is something that I have naturally in my background, and we really started to look at as something that could probably address those loneliness and confidence building skills.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've always talked about, or I've heard lots of programs and coordinators and stuff talk about as well, is those soft skills, right, and those connections with one another. But we focus a lot on youth when we start talking, young adults when we talk about employment. But I think one of the things that me and you have talked around a lot before is the support that an individual needs. So it's more than just setting up a group of people to connect and play games together, or to network with one another, or have an outing. But the community support that continues, I think, around trying to strive and achieve some of those goals, and like having that support with you when you experience something and it doesn't go well, and being able to build you back up.
Yeah.
Will you talk a little bit about like that community piece? Because I think you touched a little bit on BASE earlier, but many people don't know that Centers for Independent Living are community-based organizations. Their programs are focused on what their community needs or the gaps that are there. But you all took such a different approach to that. I think it's the amount of community and support and rallying together really changed a lot of how outcomes looked.
Absolutely. And I think, BASE as a program was born out of a lot of conversations that began with like youth leadership forums, and like the April pre-conference, I think was every before it ever is a breakout session, it's the conversation you have next to the coffee pot, and in the airport on the way to the conference. So BASE is kind of a response to some of those. But it really challenged, looking at, that old adage, you do the best you can until you know better. And then once you know better, you try to do better. And that's a Maya Angelou quote that I'm sure I didn't get exact. But when it comes to community, I think community living and community first choice, and this word community is something that we talk about a lot in IL. And I always associated with the living independently part. So I'm living in the environment that I choose, whether it's an apartment or a house, with the services I need. But the more, we talked around, the idea of community and getting access to it, an apartment is a physical location, a community is people. And that's not something that we, at least at this time, I saw a lot of us intentionally going after, is how do we connect people with people, and not just, you live in an apartment in the community independently. I think it was, for a lot of times, it was presented, intentionally or not, as a linear process. So yes, graduate high school, let's focus on getting you a job, then let's focus on getting you an apartment. And once you get all those things, let's check all these boxes, then, friends will happen. And you can then meet people. And, we know that doesn't, that meeting people is part of the motivation for those other things, right? So the reason I get a job, the reason I want money, is because I have places to go and people to go out and see. If I don't have those things, it takes away the primary motivation for wanting a job, or, to practice my hygiene or look fresh, or do those soft skills. So setting up community, I think YLFs do a great, youth leadership forums do a great job. April's pre-conference, other conferences around the country, transition conferences, but they're isolated. So they're 1 week or 1 weekend a month, and only a certain number of people can go. So accessing, where do you access when you need that feeling of community? So that's where BASE, we started coming around the idea of how do we set up through a center a program that is, and we picked the name BASE because it's a very relatable. Everybody's played tag, or some version of it, and the first thing that you do is establish base, right? So base is either the monkey bars or the couch. And as soon as you put your hand there, no matter how weird the game is, no matter how stressed out you are by it, if your hand is on that spot, universally the understanding is nobody can mess with you. I can take a break. I can be myself. I can make a plan. But I can't stay here. I can come back here whenever I need it, but I always have to take what I got here and go play the game again. So the analogy and the kind of the cornerstone became, if life is the game, that we're all playing. Wouldn't it be nice as a young adult or somebody of any age, um, if you knew where to run and put your hand and say, no, not right now. Right now, I'm going to surround myself by the things and the people that I've chosen, to build that confidence. And that's really, what sprang into programs like the improv, which we'll talk about. But the other part of it, the community piece that Sierra brought up, and this is different, but I like this podcast because it has these conversations and it pushes the boundaries of what we've always done. Because honestly, we're dealing with problems we've never dealt with before. So to think that we're going to tackle them the way we did others, is a practice in not getting things done. We opened up this program specifically, um, uh, and the activities within it open to everybody. So we are at base, a separate location from the center. We are a program of it, but all activities that happen in that location are all abilities, all ages. So the idea of setting up community is also about not isolating yourself. So sometimes I can say this for myself personally, you can go from a place where you're under identifying as a person with a disability, and that, no, I don't have a disability and I don't want to be part of any of that stuff, to a place where you've over identified and your job is disability, all your friends are related to disability, and you don't have anything outside of that because the center or that disability program is the place where you feel safe. So we also wanted to challenge that. Let's build community based on interest and not necessarily label. So that's where programs like improv seem like a natural fit.
Well, and I think you've also talked about what you told me is getting people engaged, and exposing them to different things. And how when we talk about community, I think, you said it best, of like bringing all those people together, cross disability or, no disability or not yet defined yet, or whatever that looks like. That group of individuals just coming together because they have a similar interest. And if they don't have the opportunity to find those interests, I think when we start talking about employment, your interests are going to be limited on what you've been exposed to. You talked about there was I think a presentation that you did on exposure and expanding horizons, kind of, or opportunities. Will you talk about that? I like that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's again like a conversation we've been circling around, but a lot, I say we, I mean a lot of us doing this work for a lot of years. In and It's about the language. So what language do you have to describe what you want? So I've been in those rooms with trying to brainstorm. Okay, we're not getting the job shadows that we want. We're not getting the numbers that we want through this program or another idea. Um, and frustrating, and even kind of like, hey, how many people do you talk to want to be a YouTube star? And everybody's like, oh yeah, everybody wants to be that, or they want to be a video game designer. And again, it's about looking at things and asking yourself why. Like, why are these consistently the answers we're getting? And if you look at we really looked at, and through this conversation with parents, talked about, like, what is your student with a disability's experiences been thus far in life versus maybe a sibling that doesn't identify with disability. And the reason, one of the reasons that we're getting a lot of YouTube and video games as career goals is because that's all they've had access to. So, we think about a student who may have gone through like kindergarten to graduating high school, and hasn't had to deal with identifying with disability. There's soccer practice, there's language programs, there's music programs, there's travel abroad programs, there's 100,000 things that you've tried and failed at before you ever get to the point in high school where you're asked, what do you think you'd like to do? And for a lot of people with disabilities, myself included, and a lot of students we work with, that's not the case. Their experiences have been doctor's appointments, therapy, um, you know, just recovery from whatever, dealing with trauma. Um, dealing with social isolation. So yeah, when they have free time, it's video games and YouTube. So then when we ask, what do you want to do? That's the only language that they have and the only experience they have to pull from. So getting to improv and building community, a lot of times our, what I think the conversation is going toward and some of the ideas that I see having an impact are not less about placing a student in a specific job with a specific employer, but it's about giving them access and exposure to different things, um, and to try and to fail at so they can figure out their language for what they want. And we're not trying to impose what our language for employment is. And that's where we get into the tropes of food, filth, or flowers, or hey, why were you, why did you fail out of college right away? Which so many of us do, even when that's what we want. It's because that might not have been, we've never been exposed to trying and failing before, so it's at a higher, the risk and the cost benefit is higher now because it's college and not soccer practice, but I still don't have that experience. So yeah, I think experience is um, access to experience is also a way to build confidence and resilience that I don't know that we offer enough through our program.
Well, I know you've talked about it a little bit. When we talk about improv, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe go over just a little bit what improv is in case we have some newbies just in general to comedy, such as myself. I find that my joke book qualifies me, but I've yet to take it on stage. So
You have at least one comic in the house. I know that. So, and yeah, and I think, Sierra and I have done improv together for years. It's only in the last like maybe 5 we've called it improv. Because and that's the beauty part about it. Improv is a form of performance theater. That's like the a lot of people know like the Whose Line Is It Anyway with Drew Carey that's been on for decades. And a lot of people will say, well, it's comedy and performing without a script. And that is true to an extent. But it's not just actors getting on stage and saying whatever they want. Um,
naturally so.
it is but there are loose sets of rules. So you're put into a scene with another actor, or depending on the scenario, maybe up to 5 or 7. And you're given a place, typically from the audience, can give suggestions, a place, how you know each other, and maybe the word lamp. And you have to stay within those guidelines of each game, but beyond staying in those guidelines, you make up the dialogue. You don't memorize anything, and you see where you go. So this in thinking about this as a improv was my introduction to stand-up comedy. That's how I got into it, as a way to build confidence on stage and also learn to deal with the things that were unexpected as a performer. Um, but really looking at you know, what is asked of everybody every day, life is inherently improv. So, we're never, it would be nice, I think, for a lot of us if we showed up to school every morning, or to work, and we're handed a script that said, this is everything everybody's going to say to you. And guess what? We've written down every correct response. You just have to memorize it and say it when you're cute. We don't get that. Like, the most we get is a syllabus or a meeting agenda. Um, so our success or failure a lot is a result of our ability to fill in those spaces between the bullet points, and that essentially is what improv is. And so it allows you, rather than sitting down and reading how to speak in public from a book, which I never understood. It allows you to try and practice failing and finding something new from that failure and having a blast while you do it. And that will translate to confidence and the ability to keep that conversation going in other areas of your life. And that was the idea going into to using improv as a base program in the first place, was using that stage to build that confidence, to have it spread out into other areas of people's lives. And yeah, it's we've seen some success with it.
What would you say? Because I think I have never been in the comedy world. You're like my closest touch to that, I guess, when I've seen you perform and stuff. But those that are new to it, or I think I think we can all relate to it, right? We all have to speak off the cuff sometimes, and we mess it up or we don't. And so when we're teaching that, though, that's not, we often are teaching employment skills as concrete skills, right? Make sure you brush your teeth and you smile and you've brushed your hair and you have professional looking clothes or attire on. You respond to people in this manner when they say hello, or these are your boundary circles, and this is what a coworker's relationship should be versus this. So how do people that are maybe interested in kind of opening up new ideas or new ways to have some of these conversations that are the in between those bullet points, as you mentioned earlier, what are some suggestions you have for them of how they could kind of incorporate some of this, or who could they partner with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think and part of the reason that we found so much success with improv in where we started. So I said I had a background in it, and I know a lot of comedians, so it was a natural first stop. It was something I had confidence in, so we started there. If you're looking at um, building a programming or looking at how to address employment in a different way, I would say, the um, go with what you're confident in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be improv. It could be another art form. It could be poetry, or it could be D&D. I think in looking at the base program at Summit, just turned 8 years old. We've been in our space for 8 years, and we are looking at having conversations like this, because if we're seeing that impact in Missoula, Montana, that these are issues and people that exist elsewhere. So, well, exactly that. What advice for anybody? And I think the closest starting point would be creating space that people with disabilities and artists can share simultaneously. And that's really what we did with improv. You know, but it can be any number of things. So I would look at in your town, if you want to specifically look at that, look to see if there's improv classes, or an improv troupe performing. um, Colleges are a great place. Often, like a theater program will have students that are looking for hours, or teaching opportunities, um, and reaching out to get something started. And we did this again because it was what we had access to. But the more we went, even the people that started showing up strictly for an improv class, or to help volunteer, who didn't necessarily identify openly with disability, once you created a space that was creative and open to all ages and abilities, we have a lot of artists. That Venn diagram of artists and people with disabilities has a lot of overlap because they're similar languages. Their art is all about trying to find a new way to describe old things, and disability is all about finding a new way to navigate life when it was built for people that do things another way. So there's a natural relationship there. And a lot of times, artists, for the first time, after being involved, will feel comfortable identifying and saying, I am a person with a disability. That's non-apparent, but I've never had a space where I felt safe. So yeah, really, and learning the language. So knowing and listening to this podcast, understanding. I think it's very interesting. I think a lot of us that have worked in these fields, much like the analogy we used about YouTube stars and video game designers, we've all felt like we could be doing more, and there's a better way and a more impactful way to do these things, but we haven't been exposed to a lot of it. So we need to find that language. We need to find the right language to address the needs that we're seeing and don't have that language yet. So I think, yeah, check out the base program. We'll give some links at the end. You can check out some stuff virtually. Check out what April's doing. I know, Sierra, you do a great job of bringing youth coordinators from across the country together. And I think the few times I've been able to make that call, what I really get out of it is that language. So it might not be, exactly, oh, I'm going to replicate this program to the letter, but it's, knowing that, yeah, there's somebody in Spokane doing Dungeons and Dragons, and there's somebody in California who's also doing improv, but they're doing it this way, so yeah, just exposing yourself to what's there and being able to take it back and saying this exists, even if the people you are trying to get approval from don't want to go in this direction, understanding that there is a language for it out there.
I I think you're hitting on a lot. I think, and we talked about this with the base of like community and bringing different people around. That's why I really wanted to highlight base as well, is because I think that shows those different artists as you spoke about, but also the different community members that have come around to bring their interest, their skill set, their passions together to expose more people to those opportunities. And we're talking Missoula, Montana, which is not urban.
Yeah.
But what is
No.
that? I mean, some urban areas probably would have, maybe some more opportunities, but can you talk a little bit about what this looks like in a rural area and maybe some of those, I wouldn't even say barriers, but things to prepare for or things to know how to navigate?
Right. I think we've seen a lot of success. And the rural is can often be more isolating. So urban areas, sometimes isolation isn't as prevalent an issue because of things like access to transportation, and variety of programming. The just the sheer that a rural student of any label, shape, or size inherently is going to have less experiences than somebody that lives in New York or in LA, just because we don't have the diversity of people and we don't have the infrastructure for different programming. So I think um, so yeah, inherently there can be more problems. Um, so this is a way to address some of that. Um, I think improv and building that confidence in communication styles. So something worth mentioning too. We are open to all ages, all abilities, but we are, our bones and our DNA are disability rights. So all of our improv games and everything we offer is put through the accessibility workshop. So everybody can do something, nobody can do everything. So you may not be able to do every improv game, but we're not going to set people up um, uh, to not succeed or to be able to participate. So, when we say communication, we're not just talking verbally. We've also retrofitted and talk a lot about how you have your entire body to use to communicate. And for some people, that may be the only thing that they have. So those are all integrated as well. And we can, if you're interested, we're always happy to workshop accessibility in games with people that are interested. But yeah, especially in a rural community, it's employment and community is all about who you know. And because everybody knows everybody. So it really is in your best interest, even sometimes more so than that college degree you can hand them or that letter of reference, is being able to sit down and BS with somebody and be like, oh yeah, I know so and so, yeah, they talked about the weather with me for 45 minutes this morning. Being able to talk about the weather in rural settings is a soft skill. Right now up in Montana, there's all kinds of people go, oh, this snow is awful, but come fire season, we're gonna, be thankful we got this moisture. And being able to have those conversations is an employable skill. And I think improv is a really fun way to build that.
Well, I love I always like chatting with you. But I, first of all, just thank you for coming and having a conversation with me. Anytime that I can lock you down to chat with me for this long is fun. But the things I just think that are important to maybe just note as kind of some takeaways as we're kind of wrapping up is the community piece. I know we talked about that, and you talked about knowing who's in your community. And maybe it's not somebody in your community that necessarily is at your job, but somebody you hang out on the weekends that has a really cool, fun thing that they do, and kind of figure out how you can connect with one another with those things. And then also, the one thing you spoke so much of the improv piece, and I think we all can relate to this, whether you've done improv or whether you've not, or whether you woke up and didn't stick your foot in your mouth this morning,
Yeah.
is the confidence piece. And anytime that we can, and you've talked about that before, of like confidence and community are really what can build success in employment, but also in somebody's life in general. If you can go into those different situations in between, into that interview, or even into that first day of the job, or the 30th day of the job when you don't like the person next to you, and you can still know what to say and how to say it, and have that confidence of who you are. And I think that community and that support piece is really crucial. So thank you for sharing all these things. I think we will, I'll have you send some links over for different maybe resources for improv, or some ideas of where people can start looking for outside of the box thinking on some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send over some links to base programming. Also some movies that we've been making. I know we talked a lot about improv, but for the people, a lot of the people who have been involved with our improv class for a number of years, and with the pandemic, separating us for so long, physically, video making and sharing videos we made at home while we were isolated became how we stay connected, and really kind of snowballed into, getting films made and written. So um, and that's done. And just quickly, the way I really like this program because a lot of it started with improv, but now we're into movie making. And if you're working with students to make a movie, there are so many transferable skills when it comes to set design, technology, running cameras, promoting, writing. Um, so again, if you're not making movies, those are skill sets that are going to be useful in other places. So, but it's that buy-in. It's that buy-in because it's movie making versus, if you set somebody up with a job shadow that they may not be interested in. So I'll share those. Those are on the Summit YouTube channel. But yeah, check those out. And yeah, happy to answer questions and have this conversation whenever.
Yeah, and I would say improv, we talked about it as an activity, right? And as something that you can do. But I think as you started off at the very beginning, improving what you're doing, whatever it is, being able to roll with that if that's their interest and fold and pull out those skills. Because I think just like the movie making stuff there's so many hidden skills and everything that you're doing, as long as you can find those and then give the opportunity for them to be exposed and learn and grow from those opportunities. So I will also send over, you'll have access to, we did mention the April Youth Coordinators Connect calls. Those are times where centers and other disability organizations are coming together to talk about what they're doing for youth and young adults, for programming and employment being one of those things that they're working towards, some of those soft skills or the pre-employment transition skills and things. So those are some of the things on top of many, many other things that they talk about. But I think anytime you can get a group of people together to share minds, there's always going to be some good information. So, well, thank you. And I guess we will connect soon.
All right. Big round of applause for Sierra, everybody.
Big round of applause for Beers.
People listening to the podcast they're all applauding right now.
They are.
You've been listening to the AOD Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center podcast. In today's episode, Sierra Royster from the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, or APRIL, spoke with Michael Beers from Summit Independent Living. You can learn more about APRIL at www.april-rural.org and more about Summit Independent Living at www.summitilc.org. The AOD Disability Employment Technical Assistance Center, or DTAC, is a project of the Lewin Group and TASH, created by a grant from the Administration for Community Living to provide evidence-based training and technical assistance to Administration on Disabilities grantees, aimed at improving competitive integrated employment and economic outcomes for individuals with disabilities across the nation. To learn more about DTAC, visit aodisabilityemploymenttacenter.com. For news and alerts about upcoming webinars and podcasts, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Music for the DTAC podcast is an original composition and performance by Sunny Sefarati, the co-director and autistic self-advocacy mentor at The Musical Autist. You can learn more about The Musical Autist at www.themusicalautist.org. We'll have another episode on competitive integrated employment for you in the near future.